The official record of the Americas relies on a highly rigid starting line. Our textbooks treat 1492 as the absolute anchor, telling us the timeline only truly begins when European ships successfully navigated the Atlantic. But in 1957, a guy digging in the dirt at a Native American site in Maine pulled something out of the ground that directly threatened that entire chronological narrative. At first glance, it didn't look like a historical anomaly. It was a tiny, heavily tarnished piece of silver. It lacked any obvious grandeur that would suggest it belonged to an entirely different era. However, if a 1,000-year-old Norse artifact truly belongs in this soil, then our timeline of European contact isn't off by a few years. It is off by nearly half a millennium. When the amateur archaeologist brushed the dirt off this coin, he made a completely reasonable guess. He cataloged it as a standard 12th century English penny. With that label officially attached, the artifact went into the Maine State Museum and sat quietly in a drawer. For 2 full decades, the broader academic establishment had absolutely no idea what was actually resting in their archives. The silence finally broke in 1978. A regional publication decided to run a perfectly ordinary feature on the local collection, complete with a photograph of the ignored silver piece. Over in London, a numismatist, a coin expert, happened to see that magazine. He took one glance at the photograph and realized a massive classification error had been made. Historical corrections rarely happen during the dramatic initial excavation. They usually happen decades later, in quiet rooms when someone finally questions a routine academic assumption. This artifact is a genuine late 11th century Norse kenny. Notice the distinct triangular head and facial markings. These details confirm its Scandinavian origin. Norwegian specialists examined the visible degradation along the edges, fully authenticating its ancient minting. This left researchers facing an impossible geographic reality. An authentic Viking currency disc existed in New England soil, roughly 400 years before Columbus was even born. Once the physical evidence is irrefutably verified, historians are forced to construct radical new mechanisms to explain exactly how it arrived. The first working theory relies on pre-existing indigenous trade networks, stretching from northern Canada down through New England. If initial contact happened far up north, a silver object could easily be bartered from tribe to tribe, moving steadily southward until reaching Maine. The alternative hypothesis is more direct. It suggests the coin wasn't traded at all, but was dropped by someone living in a Viking settlement located right here in the United States. We know Norse explorers built structures in North America. These grass-covered sod houses, excavated far north at Lanceau's Meadows, prove they crossed the ocean. Finding actual Viking evidence transitions the ancient Icelandic sagas. They cease to be mythological stories and act as literal, geographic maps of the past. But every seemingly perfect archaeological discovery invites scrutiny. To test this one, researchers shifted their focus away from the coin itself and looked entirely at the amateur who originally found it. The amateur archaeologist had a highly specific background. He maintained extensive personal and professional connections overseas, particularly across Europe. A person with that exact network could easily acquire a genuine 11th century Norse artifact from a European dealer through the mail, rather than digging it out of an ancient American trade post. The moment the finder's background is compromised, a massive historical breakthrough suddenly looks like a potential crime scene for forgery. We have to look at the cultural environment of the 1950s. This decade was a peak era for historical forgeries, particularly involving Viking artifacts. There was an intense, widespread public hunger during that time to prove that Norse explorers had made it deep into the American continent. That cultural desperation provides the motive someone would need to take a real coin, walk into the woods, and plant it in the loose dirt. Even with verified Norse settlements located further up the coast, lone objects found by solo amateurs carry a permanent cloud of suspicion. We are left with a permanent dilemma. The Maine penny is either undeniable proof of ancient transoceanic contact, or it is a perfectly executed, decades-long prank. Ultimately, the Maine penny shows how our understanding of the past can be destabilized by a single object, provided we can never quite be sure how it got there.